Join me today on Walk with History as we talk about the first documented lynching to happen in Memphis, Tennessee on January 1st, 1851. I'm Jen of Walk with History, and I'm here in Market Square in Memphis, Tennessee. I am a researcher for the lynching site projects of Memphis. When I was getting my graduate degree at the University of Memphis in Museum Studies and American History, I became a researcher for the lynching site projects of Memphis. And what they do is they find the locations where lynchings had happened in Memphis and try to find as much information about them so we can put up markers, and the markers are here to just educate the public about the past. So we're all working from a place of truth. So the first case that I was given 6 newspaper articles about a lynching that happened here in Memphis, Tennessee on New Year's Day, 1851. This is the marker in Market Square. The marker for the lynching is on the other side of the park, kind of by where the bus stop is. But this is the marker in Market Square, talking about the city setting it aside for a park in 1819. It also talks about a church was here, a newspaper office was here, first bank, first school. What they don't talk about is this is where the first jail was as well. So when I was given the 6 newspaper articles by another fellow researcher in the Lynching Sites Project, I went and dug in and found 30 newspaper articles using newspapers.com. So I recommend, if you ever use newspapers.com, and I have a bunch of my research here, you spend time using search terms that would be the norm in 1851. Lynching as a word is probably not going to come up as often in 1851, but runaway, slave, mob violence, hanging, those kind of things will come up. Now, in this particular case, these newspaper articles were in newspapers from New York to Oregon to Ohio, all the way down to Louisiana. And the purpose of my research was not only to verify the events that happened that day, but in all those newspaper articles, not one mentions the name of the man who was lynched. They say slave, runaway slave, Negro, black man, but they never give him his name. And so my research was centered around finding his name. And why was his name even kept out of the newspapers? What's the purpose for that? And to take away humanity, take away identity, to do that for a reason, maybe to give more validity to that person being a possession. And because that person is a possession, they don't need to have a name. But the events that happened here that day in 1851, contextually, Memphis is a town on the Mississippi River. It is a big river, and because Andrew Jackson, who first bought Memphis area, first bought land here, and he named Memphis Memphis, he saw the Mississippi River and decided it looked kind of like the Nile, and then wanted to name Memphis after a city in Egypt, and that's why it has its name, much like a city in Egypt.
Did not know that.
Today, Memphis has about 550,000 residents. It's known for various things. Graceland is here. This is the home of Elvis Presley. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis on August 4th, 1968. But in 1850, this event takes place in 1851. In 1850, the population was about 8,800. So 8,800 people lived here. Again, it was a port town. There was enslavement going on here. There were slave traders here because of the being on the Mississippi. You could trade enslaved people as well as other things that were considered commodities. So the event of 1851, near this spot on January 1st, 1851, a mob of 1,200 to 1,500 people. So if the population is 8,800 people, that's almost a fourth of the people, a fifth of the people who are present for this lynching. And it's New Year's Day, it's about 2 o'clock, so an unidentified black man for the murder of John Chester the city recorder. The victim was likely a passenger aboard the SS Winfield Scott, which had ported in Memphis that day. At 2 p.m., police arrested him on suspicion of being a runaway slave and escorted him to city offices on Front Street for questioning. By state law, he was required to present his certificate of freedom to the city recorder, John Chester. Chester declared the certificate a forgery and ordered the man to be arrested as a runaway slave. Then it continues to the backside. Some markers have this. Upon hearing his freedom was being revoked, the black man exclaimed, "I am as free as you are," pulled out a pistol and fatally shot Chester in the back of the head. A witness confiscated the pistol. The assailant was taken to the jail at Market Square, right here, and according to the Memphis Eagle, a mob soon formed, forced the jailer to surrender his keys, dragged the prisoner outside, and hanged him from a nearby tree. Before dying, the victim reportedly confessed he was a slave, having run away from D.L. Heron of Coffeyville, Mississippi. This lynching is believed to be the first in Shelby County. The name of the victim was never determined. So that, I never got to determine the name. I got it down to about 4 names, but never could find the exact name. Now you can see it's sponsored by the Lynching Site Projects of Memphis and the National Park Service. And I left some roses here, and I'm also gonna leave a heart rock here as well. I'm gonna take us on the walk from where he would have ported to the Exchange Building and talk about what is the circumstances around this event. Why is he presenting a certificate of freedom? What is a certificate of freedom? Why are runaways being really sought after and looked at in 1851? And this is a pre-Civil War lynching. That's the name of this. So that's kind of rare because in 1851, it's considered property. It's not even, it wouldn't be a big deal to kill your enslaved. They're considered your property. It's not unique to kill your enslaved. And for this to happen and being so unique as it was, to make such a spectacle of it as it was, is something that is unique. He's wielding some kind of power in some way that they need to stop. And so that's why this is so important to have this marker. But I'm gonna go to the port where the Winfield Scott would have ported and talk about the Winfield Scott a little bit, and then go to the Exchange Building, talk about why a certificate of freedom would be used and needed, and then come here and we'll talk about the event that happened. So here I am on the water here in Memphis. So you can see this island here is Mud Island. It's a man-made island. It was made with dredging the Memphis and the mud that came up, and they made it. But now you have the Memphis Bridge here, and you have some steamboats down here. This cobblestone here is actually original. So this is what it looked like in 1850, in the 1860s. This is original cobblestone here. But the Winfield Scott would have ported somewhere in this area, probably down there, more than likely, maybe over here. But it was not a far distance to get to the Exchange Building. But if you, like I said, if you ported for the day or for a couple hours, you have to, especially before you leave a slave state, going into a free state, you have got to present your certificate of freedom. So that is what that gentleman was doing when he went to go see John Chester at the Exchange Building. But this is the mighty Mississippi River right here. And then this is Mud Island right here. And they still do riverboat tours, and you'll still see barges going down here laden with cargo boxes and things along that nature. But this is here, I'm on Union Avenue and Riverside Drive, right in Memphis, Tennessee. So I am on Front Street here in Memphis, Tennessee. You can see the bridge behind me right there that looks like an M. But I'm on Front Street, and I'm between Poplar and Exchange. And this is where the Exchange Building would have stood in 1851. I got that from the Memphis Directory for 1850, and it gives the history of Memphis. And so in the newspaper articles, when it said that the man was taken to the county recorder's office at the Exchange Building, I knew that this is where the building once stood in 1850. In the city directory, it says, on Front Row, extending from Poplar to Exchange, known as the Exchange Building, is the most magnificent city hall, 162 feet. And besides several smaller, spacious halls, it has other public purposes: courts, a medical hall, the council chamber, and the mayor's office. And we know that the clerk worked in the mayor's office. The newspaper article said he held the enslaved man in the mayor's office. He was looking for a police officer to arrest him. He couldn't find one. He told him to stay in the mayor's office. But this is where it was located in 1851, right here in downtown Memphis. Now it is the Canton Center Convention Hall to present something. They have an art exhibit out front here as well. Some other things here as well. That is like a monorail kind of tram that takes you over to the Mud Island Museum. It's kind of famous from The Firm when Tom Cruise is running away. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a certificate of freedom and what does that mean necessarily. So before the Civil War and before enslavement was abolished, in slave states especially, you could be free as a black person, but you had to carry a certificate of freedom with you. That means that somebody has declared you free. You went to the city clerk and it's signed by the county, it's signed by the mayor of that county, and you carried it with you. It was one sheet of paper, it was written out, it usually had the date on it that you were declared free, and that was it. If you lost it, you could be enslaved again. And if you had to have it on you at all times, and it didn't, you know, dirt or getting it wet or anything along that nature. Plus, a lot of African Americans at that time didn't know how to read or write because they didn't want them to make forgeries. That was the big reason why they had to educate their slaves, because they didn't want them to be able to do things like make a forgery of a certificate of freedom. So how do I know he was traveling on the Winfield Scott? Two reasons. One, there's a lot of articles from people who were aboard the Winfield Scott that day. People who were sailing on that ship, passengers on that ship, wrote articles saying there was a man on our ship and he was taken off and then he was lynched and we could see it from the ship as we were leaving. And then you get responses from newspapers in Memphis saying, we can do what we want here, you don't need to tell us what to do in Cincinnati. So the Winfield Scott was leaving from New Orleans. So I was able to find that it ran in the New Orleans newspaper saying we would be leaving New Orleans, passenger steamer Winfield Scott. Leave for above and the determined ports on Thursday. So these would run in the newspaper like New Orleans in case people wanted to travel. This was the way to get that information out to the public. If you want to travel, if you want to go to these places, this ship is leaving on Thursday and it's going to these places. So I could see that it was going to be in Memphis, and it coincided it being in Memphis on January 1st, 1851. So to find his name, I thought, what about manifests? Because ships manifest their passengers, and what about the Winfield Scott manifesting its passengers for 1851? If I could find that manifest, maybe I could find his name. Unfortunately, the Winfield Scott has sunk 20, 30 years later, and everything was lost on the ship. But if a ship did port in Memphis, if you were in black and you weren't traveling with your master, you would leave the ship and go to the city clerk, like this gentleman did, and present your certificate of freedom, or an enslaver could give you a travel certificate, and that's what David Heron tries to say that he did, and who knows, maybe David Heron did. But David Heron says in the newspaper that he had given this man permission to travel. It would be very rare, I wouldn't even think null, that an enslaver would give you permission to travel to a free state and then come back, because you're probably not going to come back. So what happens in 1850 that makes this this tension so high? The Fugitive Slave Act is passed in 1850. So the Fugitive Slave Act means that the North, the free states, are now legally obligated to help return slaves back to slave states. And so that also gives enslavers permission to send slave hunters into the free states to get their enslaved back. But that also means slave hunters go to these free states and find black people who don't have a certificate of freedom because they don't really need one, and just take them back to the South and enslave them. That's what happens in 12 Years a Slave. But that's what's happening in 1850. So 1851, New Year's Day, 1851, everyone's on edge watching who's traveling north. This whole case is very unique in that regard, but it's not unique that I'm sure this happens time and time again, and maybe some people did get free and maybe some people did not. Now, John Chester, the city recorder, was murdered. It's mentioned in every newspaper article. He was killed. So the black man did kill the white man. He shot him and killed him. And I think in 1851, if you are doing that, then you pretty much know that no good is going to come of that. Now, would they necessarily hang you? Maybe not. But you know that you're going to have some high repercussions for an action like that in 1851 in a slave state. So it leads me to believe that this person did not want to go back to enslavement. They were so fed up with whatever their lifestyle had been that they did not want to go back to it, and they were willing to risk what could happen if they had killed a white man and what could happen to them. And this